1915, and the world is at war. A war that was expected to be over by Christmas, but instead has become a stalemate of blood, mud, and 500 miles of trenches that stretch across France and Belgium to the North Sea. As First Lord of the Admiralty, I knew we needed a new strategy to break the deadlock that had already cost us 1.5 million lives. So, I came up with a plan which, like most good plans from great men, was quite simple. We would blast Turkey out of the war. Sir John.
Good afternoon,
Mr.
Churchill.
Have a seat. What do you think of this? We will send a battle fleet up the Dardanelles and into the Sea of Marmara. The guns of the battleships could destroy the Turkish fleet, then sail on to Constantinople, where they could bombard the city till the Turkish government surrendered. The Russian fleet, which was trapped in the Black Sea, could sail out to help us sink the German navy. Then the Allied troops would invade the Balkans, sweep across Europe, and attack from the east. No country can fight a war on two fronts. Germany would be defeated. War would be over by next Christmas.
Using the Royal Navy to take out the Turks and thereby winning the war, yes, I rather like that idea. Assemble a fleet of our latest dreadnought battle cruisers, a screen of destroyers, minesweepers, of course, and as well...
No, my dear Admiral Drewery. You are going up against Turks and garrison troops at that. We can't spare any of our latest ships. They're needed to guard our home water. But some of our older ships would be good enough for a cruise up the Dardanelles, and the French have promised us to come to the party with a few ships.
But what about minesweepers? We believe the Turks have mined the Dardanelles. It would be suicide for us to go up there without them being cleared.
Of course. We'll arrange some fishing boats or something. Put your own crew aboard. Should do a fine job. I'll leave you to organise things. Shall we say 18th of March for the attack? Excellent.
It was a disaster. The fishing boats that we used as minesweepers were not powerful enough to go against the tides of the Dardanelles. They missed some of the mines. Then we sailed closer to the shore to sweep the second minefield and came under fire from the Turkish coastal guns. We moved to protect the minesweepers and opened fire on the coastal defences, and we hit the third minefield. It was chaos. The heavy Turkish guns were raining shells, the mines were exploding, and our ships were at risk of colliding as we turned and head for the open sea. 3 ships were sunk, 3 badly damaged. There is no way that we can breach the Dardanelles without the army. We need the army to take out the coastal defences. Before the Navy could launch a second front and go up the Dardanelles once again. I'm sorry, Mr. Churchill, but that's the way it is.
An army to destroy the guns, eh? General Hamilton. Just to check this up. Sir Hamilton. Got a little job for you and your soldiers. The Navy has failed to destroy the Turkish forts and open the Dardanelles for our ships and those of the Russian fleet. So I have decided to send in your army. The landing is to be on the Gallipoli Peninsula.
Gallipoli? No one's ever heard of the place.
But after 1915, Gallipoli will be a place no one will ever forget. Now, General, the plan is for you to land a mixed force of British, French and Indian troops on the southern end of the peninsula. and engage the Turks on the hills above. Then we need a second landing 20 miles up the coast, where the troops can advance across open country to the hills, cut off the Turkish supply lines, then join up with the main Allied troops advancing from the south. The second landing would be fairly easy, but what troops to use? Well, what about those colonials you've got sitting around in Egypt? What are they called? The ANZACs or something.
Oh yes, that's the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. Pretty unruly lot, you know, Mr. Churchill. Not a patch on your well-trained British regulars.
Oh, but they'll only be up against Turkish troops who haven't won a battle in 200 years.
Yes.
And well, that's settled in. Let's say 25th of April. I'll expect we will have routed the enemy in a day or two, swept them off the peninsula and back to Constantinople. We will capture the forts, destroy the guns and open up the straits for the Russian fleet. Johnny Turk would have no match for our soldiers, even those colonial ANZACs.
But they were, yes. Turkish army at Gallipoli were well trained, well armed and fearless. They were defending their country against the invading infidel and would win or die in the attempt.
And they were well trained under the command of German officers that were far better commanders than these British generals.
On the evening of the 24th of April, the invasion fleet assembled off the Gallipoli coast. Battleships, destroyers and troop ships packed with Australian and New Zealand soldiers waited to hit the beach at dawn.
The prospect of death or glory the next day made sleep impossible. Many soldiers wrote what might be their last letters to parents and loved ones back home. Some spent the night in prayer and contemplation. Others had smuggled bottles of rum on board, and bursts of song and laughter could be heard across the water. Others cleaned their rifles, sharpened their bayonets, and repacked their kit.
Every soldier carried a complete and full kit. The landing, however, got off to a bad start when the New Zealand and Australian troops, for some unknown reason, the Navy landed the soldiers a mile or two to the north of where they were supposed to have been. So, instead of a landing on a flat terrain, they came ashore at was what to become known as ANZAC Cove.
Imagine, if you will, a beach as long as from here to the Amberley school, and as wide as from here to the back of the hall, with steep cliffs reaching up to hills as high as Mount Grey.
And these cliffs were crisscrossed with ravines and gullies and covered with scrub concealing Turkish trenches and barbed wire. Machine guns were sighted on the ridges, snipers in the scrub and artillery and howitzers on the hilltops. Welcome to ANZAC Cove.
Welcome to hell.
The Australians were the first to land. At early dawn they were ferried ashore in steam launches. All was quiet until the Australians hit the beach and the Turks started firing. Sniper and machine gun fire swept the beach, while shrapnel fired from the artillery on the hills scythed the soldiers down. Those who reached the cliffs, those who reached the comparative safety of the cliffs sheltered, but then had to scramble and fight their way up the heights under sustained Turkish fire.
Already the beach was covered with dead and badly wounded soldiers, and blood stained the ocean pink for 100 yards in every direction.
But by mid-morning the Australians had managed to fight their way to the heights above the cove. But they'd suffered over 50% casualties and were almost out of ammunition and were facing a well-constructed Turkish defence and determined Turkish defenders. The Australians needed help.
So at 10 o'clock we finally were ferried ashore. The 1st Canterbury Battalion, which included a lot of us local men, was in the first boats, and the Turks were ready for us.
The snipers targeted the naval ratings in charge of the boats, and then the machine guns opened up on the soldiers in the drifting boats. To escape the terrible gunfire, soldiers jumped over the side into the chest-deep water, but many with their rifles and packs were drowned before they ever reached the shore.
But on and on we came, through the waves, across the beach to the cliffs, and up through the gullies and ravines with that deadly Turkish fire, killing and wounding every step of the way. 600 New Zealanders were killed or wounded on that first day.
The battle raged for 5 days, with both sides doing everything they could to kill each other. Some frontline trenches were won and lost 4 times.
Every soldier was a hero. One trench we captured was only 3 feet deep, so we were exposed to Turkish fire from the waist up. Fortunately, there was a small ridge in front of me, which gave me some extra cover. The Turks were only 10 yards away. Tom, the soldier next to me, was the only other one in our section of trench still firing. Then he got hit in the head. Blood was pouring out of him, but he kept reloading, aiming, shooting. Another bullet got him in the head, which knocked him unconscious. I thought he was finished, but he soon recovered and was able to load and reload rifles for me to fire. I was using 3 rifles, firing into the massed Turkish troops as fast as Tom could load them. The rifles were almost too hot to hold. The firing from our side was falling away as more of our men were killed or wounded. After about half an hour, I was hit in the elbow. Tom bandaged the wound, but it was difficult for me to work the bolt and fire the rifle. The Turks charged into the trench with fixed bayonets, and it looked as if it was all over for us, when, just in time, reinforcements arrived, and the Turks were driven back.
But the Turks attacked again. Wave after wave of them hurled themselves at the shallow frontline trench. The remaining ANZAC troops were forced to withdraw, and when the sun rose next morning, the trench was again in Turkish hands. By the end of the first week, we realised we faced a situation we couldn't win, and one that we couldn't retreat from either.
Of the 3,100 of us who landed at Gallipoli, 380 were dead and 700 wounded. A German general described the ANZAC troops as lions, led by donkeys, and he was right.
So the campaign settled down to making the captured area safer. Miles of deep trenches were dug, strong points roofed and reinforced with sandbags, and bivouacs constructed to give the men some protection from those damn snipers. For the soldiers, life became a reduced existence of flies, lice and dysentery. Basic food, salty beef, rock-hard biscuits, rotten cheese and watery jam, and with flies in and on everything. The water ration was only 2 litres a day. However, the highlight of the day, of course, was the issue of the rum.
Stealing was a way of life for the ANZACs, but you only stole from the officers or from other battalions, never from your mates. You stole anything: food, water, blankets, and rum, especially rum. Wooden barges loaded with supplies would come into the beach and be unloaded under the cover of night.
By morning, the barges would have disappeared, demolished to become reinforcing for dugouts or trenches. Everyone looked forward to sunset, a respite from the burning sun, the flies and the snipers. The only relief for the troops was to go swimming off the beach, but even then they risked death from snipers or artillery fire.
And so the campaign dragged on. These colonial troops, or ANZAC chappies, had done remarkably well to capture and hold the section's coastline, but they couldn't beat the Turks back from the top of the cliffs. And by the end of June, the ANZACs were exhausted. Of the 8,300 New Zealand soldiers who had landed there, 3,300 were dead or had been evacuated due to wounds or disease. They had faced 2 months of continuous stress from living in a battle zone with no fresh food, not enough water, dysentery, and every day seeing their comrades die. But I knew they could be relied on for one more attack, one last attempt to capture Chunnock Bear, the high point of the ANZAC Cove. A second invasion was planned. 20,000 fresh British troops would be landed at Suvla Bay, 20 miles north of ANZAC Cove. At the same time, the ANZACs would launch an attack on Chunnock Bear, supported by heavy naval bombardment. When their objective was captured, they would head north to Leek with the Allied troops landing and capture those damn forts protecting the Dardanelles. The attack was set down for the 6th of August, and it had to succeed.
But everything went wrong. The Allied troops landed at Suvla Bay almost unopposed, but instead of going up the hills to capture, they stayed on the beach. 2 days later, they attacked, but by now the Turks had reinforced their strong points, and the Allied troops were forced to retreat back to the beaches.
The promised naval bombardment blasted the Turkish positions on Chunnock Bear, shattering their trenches and tearing up barbed wire entanglements. Did a wonderful job.
But some of the shells fell short, causing serious casualties amongst our troops. Then at 4:23 a.m, 7 minutes before our troops were due to go over the top, for some unknown reason the bombardment stopped. During the lull, the Turks rushed back into their front line, repairing sections of trenches and setting up dozens of machine guns ready for the expected attack.
From 50 yards away we could see what the Turks were doing, and our officers refused to let us attack until 4:30. Well, 4:30, the officers blew their whistles, and we leapt out of our trenches and raced across no man's land to a murderous, unending wave of Turkish machine gun bullets. We cursed, we fell, and we died, but somehow, enough of us, made it to the enemy trenches, and with rifle, bayonet, boots and fists, succeeded in capturing their frontline positions. For 36 hours, we managed to hold Chunuk Bair, the hill that had been our objective since the April landing. For 36 hours, with comrades dead and wounded, almost out of ammunition and drinking water too, exhausted, deafened by the firing, we beat back repeated attacks by Turks who had been ordered to fight and die. And while we fought and died, we could look across to Supla Bay and see the British troops playing football on the beach and swimming in the sea.
On the 9th of August, the ANZAC troops holding Chunuk Bair were relieved by British troops who had just landed at ANZAC Cove. The ANZACs went back down the beach to collect food and ammunition, while the relieving British troops, thinking it was safe, had us lie down and went to sleep. The Turks again attacked, surrounded the British, and wiped them out.
We lost 450 men killed and wounded on Chunuk Bair, and it stayed in Turkish hands for the rest of the war.
And so, another front turned into another stalemate of trench warfare.
No further major attacks were launched against the Turks. We couldn't capture the heights above ANZAC Cove, and they couldn't drive us off the cliffs and the beaches into the sea.
And all we tried to do was to get enough to eat and drink and stay alive.
The campaign was another failure, and the evacuation of Gallipoli was ordered for the 20th of December.
The evacuation was successfully carried out under the cover of darkness. Of 8,556 New Zealanders who landed at Gallipoli, 2,265 died and over 4,000 were wounded. It was such a terrible price to pay for the nothing that was achieved.
We were taken by the ships to Egypt, where we recuperated, were rearmed and reinforced. But I left many mates behind. So many went to unmarked graves.
I had to resign as First Lord of the Admiralty, and in 1916 I went to fight in France.
In 1916, we were shipped to France, where we fought for 3 more years in the mud, shell holes, and frontline trenches. That was the war in Europe. There we fought, and there we died.
In all, 18,500 New Zealanders were killed in the Great War, the war that was to end all wars, and another 50,000 were wounded.
In Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow, in Flanders Fields, by Lieutenant Colonel John McRae.